Hi everyone, it's Henry here. Now, a couple of months ago, Games Workshop invited us up to spend the day playing around with the new contrast paints and the reformulated shades. It was a ton of fun, and I'm sure you've seen all the various promo stuff they've been putting out. They sent us a set of each to have a play around with, and I've been racking my brains of what I could do as a project to have some fun with them. I was looking through the various pots, and then I came across this screen, and I was like, yes! It's time for another BADAB video. So let's paint. We're going to start our pre-shade off from a brown base rather than the black base. Now I've chosen Thondia Brown here by Games Workshop, thinned it about 50-50, maybe slightly more thinner, spraying it 25 psi through our Harder and Steenbeck Signature Series Evolution. So that's got a 0.4mm needle and nozzle in it. And the reason I'm going to start from a brown base rather than the black base is because contrast paints, when we airbrush them, and if you've watched many of our videos, you'll know that's how I mainly use them. I'm a massive fan of them as airbrush paints. They're very, very translucent, even though they've got quite a powerful colour. So it means they're see-through. Now, this means that the colour that we have underneath them shows through in that final version, colour, finish, whatever you want to call it. So if we just left it black, if I use colours like yellow and quite a yellow green, which this is, then where that goes over the black, you get this horrible, dirty, washed out, just nasty colour. Whereas if we put a nice brown like this under it, that's going to come through and change the tone of the green, but it'll make it look like we've done it on purpose, rather than, let's say, it just being sprayed over black. Now this whole project is really just a bit of fun. I thought I'd challenge myself to paint slightly differently to how I normally do. So I'm going to use a lot of these Games Workshop products on the model. I'm not going to use oil paints. And it's not exactly army painting. I'm taking a little bit longer than I normally would on it. And the main stage that I'm taking much more time on is going to be the pre-shade. Now I'm using one of these Space Marine Heroes second season, whatever it's called, Terminators. Really, really lovely sculpts, great size, very dynamic. And when I thought about the Mantis Warriors, this was the model that jumped in mind to try out. So I've left in the entire of the pre-shading that I'm going to do on this miniature, so you guys can get a bit more of an idea of how I go about it. So I'm using my airbrush to spray the paint on, and my airbrush is being the light source, essentially. So as we look at it from the front, it's coming from the top right, and we look at it from the back, it's coming from the top right. And this is going to determine the areas of light and shadow across the various shapes on the model. Just wanted to quickly say thanks ever so much to everyone that's subscribing here and also over on Patreon. The numbers are going up and up, and it's allowing us to bring in more people and produce more content tutorials for you guys every month. Massive thank you, with no intentions of stopping. So this in real time took about, 10 minutes maybe, I think I spent doing the pre-shade on this guy. And I've really thinned the Tamiya flat white there, probably 6 or 7 drops of thinner to paint, so I can build it up really nice and slowly. Now once I was happy with it, I decided to do the yellow first. For this I'm using Ironjawz Yellow, which is one of the new ones. I don't know what they've done with this colour, but I was talking to Andy about it the other day. It's like they've made a dirty yellow, but it looks really nice. It was just perfect for this. All 5 of the yellow paints now that you've got in the contrast range, they're all absolute crackers. Like if I airbrush a yellow scheme, straight away they will be my ones I try first to see if they come out like I want. And once I'd sprayed on 3 or 4 layers of that, because the colour does get a lot more intense as it dries and you build the layers up, I'm just going to mask them off. You can use liquid mask, blue tack, tape, whatever you want. I like to use this masking putty by MIG. Now for the green. We have a nice look at our pre-shade here, so you can see all the shapes. You can see we've got light and dark across all the different panels of the armour. And we're going to go in with the Mantis Warriors green. Now I've thinned this the same way I've thinned the yellow, roughly 50-50, maybe a touch more paint than thinner, and we can just use normal airbrush thinner with it, it's absolutely fine. You can see just 2 layers over the front there, how strong that colour's already coming, but you can also see the difference that brown has made in the shadows. Now if I was painting an army using this recipe, I'd be making really sure to do 1 coat of paint at a time, let it dry, do the second one, and make a note of the dilution of the paint and then also how many layers of paint I've used, just to help me get some consistency of colour across an army. When we're using really translucent paints like this, basically glazes, you can get quite a wide variation in that if you're not accurate with your mixes. So I think I've got about 3 layers on here now, and if I remember rightly I did one more off camera. And I just wanted to add a touch more colour sort of into the mid-tone, just to introduce another tone, and I've mixed into the cup just a brush's worth of the old Ork Flesh contrast paint. I say old, it was in the first round, you can still buy it. And it just darkens it down a touch, it changes the colour nicely. I tried Ork Flesh on its own, it was too strong. And as I say, I'm just aiming that in the sort of mid-tone areas, so the areas between the shadow and the highlights. Now in the artwork, the Terminators have got that little yellow stripe down the middle of their helmet, like the veterans do. So all I'm going to do is just paint that in using a white paint, and then I'll paint over that using the Ironjawz Yellow again. And I've found that, as is often the case when we paint a colour on with a brush rather than airbrush, you get a different colour. It's a lot stronger, like it is here. So I went back and mixed in a little bit of the Thondia Brown and then gave that a layer, and that's a close enough match me for this. It's absolutely fine. Now I want to prep the whole model for transfers and pin washing. So I'm giving it a nice heavy coat of gloss paint. By heavy coat, I don't mean one thick coat, but I mean 4 or 5 thin layers until it's really shiny, sort of looking like a boiled sweet. And again, same pressure, same dilution in the airbrush, about 50-50, maybe a touch more, maybe 2 to 1, thinner to varnish, and then 25 psi. Now for our pin washing, I said I was avoiding oils, but I have used some enamels, but that's it other than contrast paint on this. I've chosen a dark green-brown enamel. This is Winter Streaking Grime. It's also got a bit of grit and dirt in it, which never hurts, because I like that look anyway. Thinned it ever so slightly with some odourless mineral spirits. That's Winsor Newton Sandstore I've used there. And in the other dish, I've just got the neat spirits to keep my brush clean. And now I'm going to give it a fairly liberal wash all over the armour, because I want this to actually filter the green as well as bring some definition into the shadows. So by filter, I mean I want to put a layer of this over the green and change the colour of it. Where I've got large flat panels, I apply it quite liberally, and then a clean brush, I just remove it, the majority of it. Also make sure when I'm doing that I'm always pulling my brush top to bottom. So with streaking grime, as the name suggests, it's a good way to create streaks on the model. So I make sure the directions always stay in the same. See when I do it on this thigh plate here as well, and then also his leg. Now I could absolutely have used another contrast paint, or maybe one of the shades, Celia Green shade, Athonia Camera shade, something like that, but I absolutely love enamels and the look they give me, and I haven't used one in a video for a while, so I decided to mix that up. I'm also planning an army project at the minute using a lot of contrasts and enamels, so I wanted to just give that a quick sort of test run. Now once that's dried, I just left it to dry overnight because I've done the decal at the same stage. I'm going to give the armour its finish. Now for this I'm using Ammo by MIG Ultra Matte. Airbrushing and contrast paints in particular are fragile, so if this is a gaming model, I might recommend that you give it a gloss coat before you do that ultra matte coat, just to make it a little bit tougher, a bit more resilient. I'm not going to do much edge highlighting on this model. A lot of the work I've put in was with getting my pre-shade right, but I'm just going to do a little bit, and mainly to represent battle damage rather than traditional edge highlighting. So on my palette I took some white paint, so thick white paint, in this case Vallejo model colour white, and I just mixed in the green, the Mantis Warriors green. So we're using the thick properties of the white paint as well as lightening it a bit, and we're using the colour from the Mantis Warriors green. It means we can create this lighter tone. And then for a few more little chips, I'm just taking a dark brown. What was this one? German camo brown, something like that. It's just a dark brown. If you've not got a dark brown, mix a bit of black in it, you'll be absolutely fine. But as I said, I was going for a slightly different way of painting, so I didn't want to do loads of damage and chipping like I normally do, but I still enjoy doing it and I enjoy the look it gives. Now for the bone parts of the model, so the crux, terminatus and the other bits and bobs on there, I'm base coating it using brown, the Thondia brown. And I'm going to highlight it by progressively adding in Games Workshop Karak stone into that Thondia brown. This isn't my go-to sort of bone recipe. I like a more green old bone look. But again, it was every step of this model I was just challenging myself a little bit to use something different, and it ended up being an absolute ton of fun to do it. We're almost at pure Karak stone now. And to get a little bit more sort of interest into it, I'm using one of the new shades here. This is Mortarian Grime. So this is sort of quite a light green-brown colour, but it will give me a slightly different finish, and it will just help blend those slightly rough transitions together that I've already done. I ended up giving it 3 layers of that wash. Now for the eye lens, and only the one because the other eye lens on him here is cracked and smashed, I thought again, how can we use some contrast, how can we have a bit of fun? So we'll do some little glowy lenses, super simple. I've taken an off-white here. I think this was pale blue or pale blue grey by Vallejo model colour, but just an off-white is absolutely fine. And I've just liberally base coated the eye socket, and I've been made sure that even the recess around the outside is nice and light. And then over the top of that I've applied Hexwraith Flame. Now I give this 2 to 3 coats, and I'm making sure that it's pooling predominantly in those recesses. Now I mix together a little bit of white paint and Tesseract Glow technical paint, and I start to paint in the centre of the lens. Now Tesseract Glow is effectively a fluorescent green ink. Really useful paint to have in your toolbox. And I just kept adding white to that and painting towards the centre of the lens. Very simple, a little gimmicky, but it's quite fun. And I went for green because I don't really like putting red eye lenses on bad guys, and I quite like limited palettes anyway, so using lots of different greens is something I enjoy doing. Now for the gold parts, I base coated it using Decayed Metal, because obviously that's what I do every time I paint gold. And for the main gold colour I'm actually using Runelord Brass, again by Games Workshop. This is a nice sort of pinky gold colour. I really like it, and I find it's very versatile depending on what you do next. So what you put over it, you can really change the sort of metal that you're trying to represent. So I'm leaving the decayed in the recesses, but I'm also trying to ignore the detail and just paint the highlight in where the light would hit it. And just to warm that gold up a bit, I've taken the new Reikland Fleshshade shade paint. I've just given that one undiluted coat over the top. It's got a load of red in it, and again it just gives us this lovely gold colour. So I've base coated the other metal areas, so the silver areas, in Iron Warriors. You can use any dark silver you like, and at the moment I'm not loving sort of glowy power weapons. It's just not my taste at the minute. I've done them loads in the past, but just not feeling them at the moment. But I wanted to get a little bit more interest into the lightning claws, so I've taken one of the new turquoise contrast paints. This one's Kroxigor Scales, and I've popped this on my wet palette, so it's ever so slightly diluted, and then I'm just going to glaze that across the top. So I'm always pulling my brush towards the area that I want the most concentration of that, so towards the base of the tines. And contrast paint dries much stronger than it initially goes on, and I actually only needed one more glaze after what you've just seen there to get to this stage, so that was 3. It's just given that little turquoisey tint. I think it looks kind of cool. And then for the other metal areas, the silver areas, I've gone for an absolute classic here, which is just a 50-50 mix of the new Agrax and the new Nuln Oil. See, by this point I really was embracing just where can I use the new paints, what can I do with them. And then final bit for the silvers, I'm just going to go in with a really bright silver. This is Vallejo Model Air Steel. It's one of my favourite bright silver paints because it's bright, it's very, very opaque, it's very easy to brush on even though it's in an air paint range. Just nice and reliable. Gives a lovely smooth coat with just one pass. It just gives us that little bit of extra definition on the metals. And that was pretty much it. I did the little black loincloth. I was a bit bored by that point, to be honest, so I just did black on that, and then I used Eclipse Grey by Scale 75 for a quick highlight. And then for the purity seals, I did the parchment the same way that I did the bone. And then for the actual wax bit itself, I used that new Sigvald Burgundy contrast paint. Just did a little blob of that on top, and again it gave a lovely little finish on it. The two little lenses in his targeter, or whatever it is, up the top, used exactly the same technique as I did on the eye, but for them I used Magmadroth Flame, I think it's called, the really super strong orange, the new contrast paint, and I used Ironjawz Yellow again on there. So, as I said, this is not typically how I paint. It's not a million miles away, don't get me wrong, I'm not reinventing the wheel or anything. But it was a really, really fun project. I had a really great time painting this guy. And I quite like the result. I would do him more grimy and battle damaged up and certainly get some oils in there because that's my taste. But if I had an army that looked like this, I'd be over the moon. Really, you know, I get tempted with everything, obviously, but BADAB's very close to my heart. So it particularly the Secessionists. So it's who knows? Maybe a kill team, right? That'd be fun. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you take anything from it, just have a play around. Try some products that aren't maybe in your normal wheelhouse, and see what you can learn from them and what you can bring from them. I'm certainly going to be using the shades a lot more over metals. I think there could be some fun things to be had then. And as I mentioned earlier, I love contrast paints through my airbrush. They're just perfect for it. And this second batch that they've done, they're much brighter colours on the whole. These are very, very close to inks, some of them. And as somebody who generally likes dark, grimy, grungy models, having a really nice bright place to start from can actually be very, very helpful because it gives you loads of space then to explore it and have some fun with making it more dingy. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you have, hit the like button. If you're not already, hit subscribe and the little bell to keep up to date with all our videos coming out. Thanks ever so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.